Yo, what up YouTube? It's your boy SP the GOAT, and I'm back at y'all again with another episode of Power Book 3, Season 5, Raising Kanan. In this episode, they called it Dark Matter, but you know how we do. We gonna remix it and call it Fallout, because we're seeing now the fallout of Kanan and Rock's relationship in the streets of Queen and in the streets of Manhattan. In this episode, you see Team Independent for a more solid core, you see Team Manhattan fall apart at the seams, and you see Team Queens become the brains of the street. But one thing we do see here in this episode is Breeze becoming the blueprint of what Ghost was in OG Power. And we haven't even been introduced to Ghost just yet in this storyline. But because we see Breeze lining himself up to become that person in Team Queens, it also means we know somebody else gotta go. And I think we find out who, what, when, and where, even why in this episode. The only thing we don't know is how. And you know me, I come ready with the theories, y'all. So you know how we do. Hit that like button, hit that hype button, and subscribe. I appreciate all the love and support, all the feedback, and I love y'all back. So with that said, let's get into it. Now, fresh out the box, stop, look, and watch. We're talking about Team Independent and how all the fallout from the developments in this episode affects this team. We all know Jukebox has been on the hunt for whoever greenlit Project Famous, but the first thing we saw her do in this episode is put Kanan in his place about his stance on being a man in the streets. And no lies were told here because of everything that's happened around the Thomas family, while Kanan keeps trying to put it on Rock, and Rock keeps trying to clean up his mess. Now, both Kanan and Rock are too close to the situation to see that they're really trying to watch each other's back. It just keeps backfiring on both of them because Kanan and Rock don't talk. And from the looks of things, it looks like Jukebox is not going to be messing with Kanan for the foreseeable future because of what Kanan did to Uncle Lou. And then he tried to hide it and dump it on Rock. And while Jukebox doesn't say it out loud, the way she left the conversation gives us the impression that she is not going to be looking out for Kanan nearly as much as she used to in the past 4 seasons, if at all. And while I predicted that Jukebox was forming Team Independent to protect Jukebox, Marvin, and Kanan, I don't think Jukebox is interested in protecting Kanan at all after Jukebox found out what Kanan did to Uncle Lou. Then we have a really interesting thing pop up with Detective Garcia. We find out he's got to be the cleanest police officer in the Queens precinct, and that's coming from the FBI that was investigating the precinct, Detective Howard, and Captain Baptiste. So when Garcia goes to ask Baptiste about the information he got from Agent Tanner with the FBI, Baptiste initially gets defensive because Baptiste is a decorated officer and he didn't know what was about to go down. But when Baptiste goes back and talks to Garcia after Baptiste's retirement party, he tells Garcia that he gave up Famous to Snaps and Pops because he felt like Famous was the cleanest thing he could give him. And the story sounds believable because, let's face it, Famous wasn't in the game, Snaps and Pops pressing him for information tied to Rock, and it seemed like there was nothing that could absolutely come from it. The information he gave to Snaps and Pops was worthless, but boy was he wrong. Then we see what grief really does to people with Captain Baptiste. He decided to self-delete because the allegation on him being dirty with the Famous case after his 35 years of service with the New York Police Department. Soon as I saw the similarities to A Few Good Men, I knew the scene was about to get dark. So I'm gonna pause here and encourage anybody listening and anybody that's watching to seek help in their times when life gets to be too dark. If there's something that's pressing you about anything, it's as easy as dialing 988. And dialing these 3 numbers could be the difference between the possibility of a brighter future for tomorrow and everybody involved with that future with a path forward versus passing on that pain to everybody else that remains. But back on track, Garcia, when he gets the information, he tells Jukebox and he gives Juke her money back because he realizes he has some power in being the only clean police officer in that precinct. And that's just Garcia guarding his reputation within the precinct. but he does agree to take on one last issue investigating the matter with Amber and the Foster family that Marvin took out for Amber's protection. Now let's go to the third wheel in Team Independent and the series' newest moral beacon, and that is Uncle Marvin. He's been recreating himself this entire season in transitioning from Rock's right hand to calling out her BS on the spot. And it seems that both Jukebox and Marvin are on the same type of timing, because while Jukebox is telling Kanan about himself, about the Uncle Lou situation, Uncle Marvin is giving Rock the business about the Uncle Lou situation. And he told no lies, because Rock did exactly what she always does in covering up for Kanan, just like Uncle Marvin said. And he pointed out that she did all of that with a clear mind. The quiet part here that Uncle Marvin is not saying is that Rock knew this entire time that sending him on Unique's path was essentially a death sentence. Marvin said less than necessary here in the conversation with Rock, so that Rock doesn't know which side he's on, because at this point, he's not committed to Rock when he says, of the business. But you can see how messed up Marvin is about the entire Uncle Lou situation when he talks to Uncle Lou at the gravesite. And he tells him he doesn't know how to deal with it because he wants to delete Kanan, but he can't. And we see him pull a kick door at Kanan's old spot with no poo shiesty, and then he stops mid-felony to reevaluate what he's going to do. Marvin is spinning out here. And then we see the plot get thicker when Marvin takes Jukebox to meet Amber, and Amber starts telling Marvin the police are getting closer to the truth because the neighbors saw a black guy running from the house and not a white guy. Now this leaves a lot to the imagination with Team Independent. I think Marvin introducing Jukebox and Amber is a way for him to make sure that they have someone for each other, because Marvin understands that something is about to happen with him, and he says as much in their little meeting. But Marvin is asking all the right questions as the beacon of morality in this storyline. Why are we protecting Kanan? Why are we lying to each other? Why is everybody pretending that this is okay? But Jukebox's move to have Garcia investigate the issue with Amber might backfire, because Garcia now knows he's the cleanest police officer in the precinct. He gave Jukebox the money back, which means Jukebox has no leverage on him if he finds out that it was Marvin that pulled the trigger. So my theory here is that Jukebox's attempt to get Marvin some protection backfires, and Garcia ends up arresting Marvin, putting him in jail for the Amber situation, because Garcia knows he has a reputation to protect in the precinct. On the other hand, we have Jukebox with the information about Snaps and Pops greenlighting Project Famous. But how does Kanan react when Jukebox tells him this? Because we saw him act cold with the fact that it wasn't Rock who greenlit Project Famous right before Marvin put the pause on him. My theory here is that Kanan finds out about Snaps and Pops next episode, and that Snaps and Pops are the series finale bodies, and Jukebox is going to be at least one of the people taking them out if she doesn't do them solo. Or it could be that Jukebox takes them out with Marvin, and maybe she takes them out with Kanan. But one thing we do know is that Jukebox will be one of them, if not the one, to complete Project Snaps and Pops. But I truly can't see Kanan greenlighting the project without Breeze knowing that Breeze is Snaps' nephew, and allegedly Breeze and Kanan are brothers. But remember, Breeze is out to be #1 in Queens. His plan to move all the OGs out of the way is still in effect. So if it's a justified green light, then maybe Pops gets got and Snaps gets out of the game, and Marvin is still going to jail either way. But maybe Breeze is going to take out Snaps and Pops because he wants to be #1 in Queens. All right, now it's time to check in on Team Manhattan, and I will tell you it's not looking good for Team Manhattan. Now, this episode, we didn't see Pino at all, but we will be talking about him at the end of this section. But the first thing we see happening with Team Manhattan is the breakup of Marvin and Rock. we see Marvin and Rock going back and forth at the top of the episode about Kanan murking Uncle Lou. Rock tried to spin out of her role in the situation at hand with Kanan, but Marvin wasn't having it. Rock tried to get Marvin back into the game, but Marvin wasn't having it. So we see Marvin making his big turn in becoming the moral beacon of the storyline, and calling Rock to the carpet about her BS is one of the things that puts a huge crack in Team Manhattan, because that's the only person that Rock has left to trust. She can't trust Flossie, she just met her. Can't trust Pino, not only because she just met him, but because Pino likely knows that Marvin was the trigger man on the Baselli project out in New Jersey, because Pino already knows that Stefano got tangled up with Sal down there in New Jerusalem, but it's not clear whether or not Pino knows that Marvin was the trigger man. Now, another thing we see that puts a crack in Team Manhattan, we saw Breeze and Kanan take out Joaquin, which was supposed to be Rock's snowblower for her new venture in Manhattan, but that plan is dead, literally. Now, one thing that stands out here about Rock and this entire team in Manhattan is the scene we saw with Olga. We saw how easy it was for Rock to spin up some BS, try to get somebody to believe it. We all know that Rock didn't find any of Famous's belongings at her house because Famous moved out from with Rock and Kanan a long time ago. But we see Rock finally wanting to feel something, and she wanted to feel that pain that Olga was feeling about Famous, and she attempted to control Olga with some BS, and even Olga called her out on that same BS. But we see her go directly to Lou's psychiatrist to try to get that same kind of closure, but the psychiatrist wasn't having it much. Just like Marvin wasn't having it with Rock, and just like Jukebox isn't having it with Kanan. The doctor put her in her place and told her she's projecting all of her feelings onto other people. Now, this is important because this is how it works in Rock's world the entire series. Rock's world is very transactional. She likes to take on everyone else's mess, clean them up, and do their jobs bigger and better than anyone else. But when it comes to her handling her own mess, like the situation with Kanan and the fact that he's never been disciplined until Uncle Marvin made a Timberland beat out that boy, Rock projects onto everyone else saying that I did everything for you. The unspoken part of that unfinished sentence is that I did this for you. What are you going to do for me? Or why can't you do what I'm asking you to do for me to protect my back? In other words, you need to clean up my BS now that I've cleaned up yours. So Rock has never had to clean up her own mess. She's always sent somebody else to do it, much like she did with Marvin and finally telling him Kanan was the one that put Uncle Lou down. But in this episode, we saw an even bigger crack form in Team Manhattan, where we see Stefano and Breeze scoop up her connect with Hafiz. So now we see Rock without her snowblower for Breckenridge, and we see her not winning the Kentucky Derby with any horse at the moment. And what does Rock do? Create a bigger mess for other people to clean up, but the only other person by her side at this time is Marvin. And we all see Marvin is not really rocking with Rock. So technically, she has nobody to back her in her BS, nobody to clean up after her. She's going to have to take full freight on this, especially seeing how she decided to take out one of Hafiz's guys at the shop. Now, my theory for Rock and Team Manhattan, you already know, I think Marvin goes to jail, if not for the bodies on the foster parents in the Amber situation, then for some other reason. But for Rock, I think her time is winding down too, because usually Rock is at the cutting edge of information. But now, nobody's telling her the truth anymore because of how she's been moving. The only person that's been telling her the truth as of late's been Marvin, but she doesn't want to hear that truth. When people get like this in the game, it's usually a short time before they disappear. And Rock right now is out in the cold as we speak. But that doesn't mean she can't turn it around by appealing to a higher authority. Now that we see Team Manhattan, the workflow and the supply chain in Flossie Siegel's operation being torn apart at the seams, will Pino try to get rid of her, and will she try to go to another Italian mob boss such as Roberto Saletti? I guess we'll have to find out on that one. But to round out Team Manhattan, we got the entire situation with Flossie Siegel. Now, the first thing we see is Flossie Siegel consulting Marvin about the loss of Uncle Lou. Flossie tells Marvin flat out it's better to bet it all on Juke. And the quiet part here, what Flossie didn't say to Marvin, is how she feels with the operation they're running, especially after the death of the federal judge. Now, while she's good at giving advice, later in the episode, we see Jarita quit tricking after her heart-to-heart with Kanan, and it looks like they set a play in motion to either rob Flossie or intentionally mess up Rock's supply chain. So while Stefano and Breeze are out stopping Rock's workflow, Kanan and Jarita either failed at robbing Flossie and unintentionally messed up Rock's supply chain, or that was the entire plan all along, but not actually greenlight Project Flossie. And I say this because I could only imagine that Kanan greenlighting Project Flossie without telling Breeze would cause some kind of rift between these two newly founded brothers. But we see Flossie hesitate to pull the trigger and start asking Kanan some questions. And this is because Flossie isn't going to pull the trigger without it meaning something. But she doesn't know Kanan until he says something to her about it. So the big question here is, how does Flossie respond to this? It's clear that she's disgusted with the entire thing from her reaction when she finds out that Kanan is Rock's son. But what does she do with Rock in her relationship, in their business? My guess is Flossie probably tells Rock to discipline Kanan the same way that Pino told Rock to discipline Kanan. But if you look underneath the hood, you'll see that this guidance would be the exact opposite of what Flossie told Marvin about Jukebox. The big question here is, what story is Kanan gonna tell Flossie? It's clear that Kanan and Jarita plan to at least mess up Rock's operation. So it could be that Kanan tells Flossie that Rock sent him to rob Flossie. My guess is that the story is going to be the one that messes up Rock's business the most, because that's Kanan's aim. Last but not least, we got Team Queens. And Team Queens is strengthening over and over again. They're rounding out the board in Queens and in Manhattan. And while they have a foothold in Manhattan right now, they still have some work to do to get their pipeline up and running, unless Kanan and Jarita might have already solved that problem. Let me explain. So we see Kanan and Jarita having a heart-to-heart in the episode, and Kanan fesses up telling Jarita that he was initially using her for the previous 3 weeks to get info on Rock's operation. So we now know that those missed dates and all that other stuff that Flossie was telling us about Jarita, it was Kanan persuading her to stay with him so he can get the information. So we also know it wasn't Rock sending Jarita into Team Queens, it was Team Queens infiltrating Team Manhattan. But Jarita still doesn't know it was Kanan who snatched up the call girl 2 weeks ago. And I want to pause here and go out on a limb with it and say that the call girl Kanan snatched, Kristen, kinda looks like Kate Egan. But we all know Kate is Tommy's mom, so unless Kate had Tommy at an extremely young age, Kristen is probably not Kate. But it is possible, seeing the line of work that Kristen is in. But back on track here, when Kanan tries explaining to Jukebox what happens to Uncle Lou, Juke was not having it. Juke basically told him, you need to choose whether you're going to be the man you say you are in these streets, or you're going to be some little kid trying to blame everything on your mom, which is exactly the conversation that Uncle Marvin was having with Rock. Both Rock and Kanan seem to have the same problem. It's like the Spider-Man meme. They're wearing the same clothes, doing the same thing, and just pointing the finger at each other. But later, when we see Kanan and Breeze link up for the first time in the episode, Breeze is trying to give Kanan a car since they had to torch the last one. Kanan is despising this free lunch because he's already had it with Rock before. But not only does this allow him to maintain his independent source of power, it also lets Breeze know that Kanan is not trying to be up under his wing, he's trying to be alongside him. But this scene lets us know one thing. This might be where Tommy gets his love for loud cars. This 1993 Catfish Camaro is loud, and Breeze even says this when he's trying to convince Kanan to take the car. But this also might explain a few other things that we saw in OG Power, like why Tommy has an appetite for being the muscle versus being the person that thinks in the game. And that could be because Tommy actually looks up to Kanan and not Breeze. But after Breeze tries to convince Kanan not to be on the block, Kanan takes out his new right-hand man Crank because Crank told him he was scared to be on the block. And this happened because it went against Kanan's need to create a cult-like following. But it also made him unpredictable to the rest of the crew, which gave him another layer of power in the street. But we can't just breeze over this part because it's important. It now goes from Kanan losing friends and other people, taking them from him, like Uncle Lou with D-Wiz, Rock with Scrap, Snaps and Pop with Famous and Crystal, Unique with OC, and Rock again and Uncle Marvin with Primo. This is the first person that Kanan is close to that he took out himself, and this is a dark turn in his character, especially seeing how Jukebox just blessed him out about his ain't shitness. Each one of his close people that he lost before this, he wanted a result. Now he's the one taking out his own friends because somebody challenged his authority, and it shows us this shift from him being a soldier to a boss. But it also brings me back to what Laces said in OG Power Season 5, Episode 5, after Laces helped Kanan clean up some of the Taínos. He goes into this Cymbalta commercial where he asks Kanan, is it difficult to make friends? Are you sad? And all of those other symptoms of depression. With all of those losses we've seen Kanan take in this dark turn in his character, it all starts to make sense on how Kanan got that way. But to wrap up on Team Queens and taking the power position in the fight for New York, we see Stefano and Breeze try to do a mission to take out Hafiz. Now this is Stefano trying to greenlight Project Hafiz, who happens to be a diplomat. Breeze comes back and gives Stefano his opinion that they should wait, which shows his value to Stefano. But Stefano let his ego go for a second and tried to chew Breeze out. But he came around to it, and he didn't outshine the master when he told Stefano to think. He even gets Stefano to apologize and then tells Breeze that Breeze is right, and that they're going to handle the situation like a diplomat, since Hafiz is a diplomat. And this is interesting because we see that Breeze now knows how to use Stefano's thumbscrew for good, as opposed to how Pino and Rock used Stefano's ego to twist him into doing something he shouldn't. In fact, Breeze actually teaches Stefano that violence has an opportunity cost, and that Hafiz might be worth more to them alive than dead. And he did this without offending Stefano's ego. So Stefano takes the advice, and Breeze and Stefano go to see Hafiz. And Stefano, in true Italian fashion, is throwing heavy salt on Rock's name like it's a T-bone at Applebee's. And it works because Hafiz was looking to get away from Rock ever since Rock upped up the first package. Now Hafiz did something smart here by keeping his hands clean, making Stefano tell Pino about the change in their business arrangements. But when Pino gets notice from Stefano that Stefano is messing with his business, it might not go over well with Pino. So how is Pino going to react to this? Are we going to find out what Pino's thumbscrew is? How is Pino going to clap back at this? Does he continue to back Rock with no horse and no snowflakes? Is Rock done? Is the deal in Manhattan going to somebody else? We don't know, but another question we have is how is Hafiz going to clap back for Rock murking one of his people at the shop after he told Rock that the deal is dead between them? All right, y'all, that's the episode. Please like, comment, subscribe, and leave your comments, concerns, complaints, moans, groans, and frustrations all in the comments below, and I will read them one by one. Thank you. I appreciate y'all for supporting, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Gone.